Pegleg Smith's Lost Gold. The legend of Pegleg Smith's lost gold has been here for generations, with many venturing into the harsh Colorado desert in search of his infamous black-coated gold nuggets. Pegleg, whose real name was Thomas Smith, was a mountain man who, like many frontiersmen of the early 1800s, led a rough and unpredictable life. A trapper and trader by trade, he was also a notorious horse rustler, earning a reputation for his cunning and his misdeeds. His journey toward fame in the area of treasure began after he lost his leg in a trapping expedition thanks to an arrow wound that left him dependent on a wooden leg, and with the fitting nickname Pegleg. But yeah, the story of Pegleg's gold begins on a routine expedition along the Colorado River in the late 1820s or early 1830s. While his team made camp, Pegleg was tasked with transporting a collection of animal pelts across the desert to Los Angeles. As he traversed the sandy, sun-scorched landscape, he happened upon a series of buttes rising unexpectedly from the flat desert terrain. Climbing to the top of one of these buttes, he discovered an odd sight, which was black stones scattered across the ground. Curious, he picked up a few, believing that they might be copper. It wasn't until he reached Los Angeles that Pegleg realized that the dark stones were, in fact, gold, a rare form of black-coated gold nuggets. This discovery could have made him a fortune, yet for unknown reasons, Pegleg left California without returning to the buttes to recover more. Instead, Pegleg's time in Los Angeles was short-lived, marked by drinking and a brawl that led to his swift expulsion from town. Rather than return to his newfound treasure, Pegleg headed for New Mexico, where he stole a herd of horses and sold them in Taos. The mystery here focuses on why Pegleg didn't go back to the desert to claim his black gold. Some speculate that he saw the treasure as just another curiosity or that he considered it too risky. Instead, he settled along the Oregon Trail in Idaho, running a trading post where he sold horses to travelers. After that, years ended up passing, and it wasn't until after the 1849 gold rush that Pegleg made his way back to California, eager to recover the gold he'd left behind. He gathered a group of hopeful prospectors and led them into the desert to search for the butte with the black-coated nuggets. Yet, the journey ended in failure. Pegleg's group wandered through the blistering landscape without any success, and he eventually deserted them. His next attempt in 1853 also ended up without success. This time, Pegleg organized another team, this time to search not only for his butte, but also for another rumored gold source in the Virgin River area, believed to have been discovered by another trapper named Dutch George Yount. This, too, proved fruitless, and the mystery of Pegleg's gold deepened. Pegleg's credibility didn't help his case though. Known for his love of drink and his tendency to stretch the truth, he left a legacy as an unreliable narrator. Some stories place the fabled butte in the Chocolate Mountains rather than the Colorado Desert. As a result, multiple accounts have surfaced, which add to the confusion and speculation over where Pegleg might have actually found the gold. The search for Pegleg's gold has attracted many hopefuls, and some have even claimed to have found it. In one notable story, a soldier reportedly traced Pegleg's path from Yuma to Los Angeles and found 3 buttes matching Pegleg's description, along with the stash of gold nuggets. The soldier ended up organizing an expedition to return to the buttes, but tragedy struck. The search party had disappeared, and later their bodies were found near the San Ysidro Mountains. In 1965, a man even wrote to Desert Magazine declaring that he had located Pegleg's gold. Whether or not his claim was true remains unknown, but it did regardless portray the idea that treasure hunters still go in the pursuit for Pegleg's lost fortune. In another instance, a miner claimed to have stumbled upon the buttes between Yuma and Warner's Ranch, where he filled his saddlebags with around $7,000 worth of gold. It's said that upon reaching Los Angeles, he fell ill and confided his discovery to Dr. DeCourcy, with whom he planned to return to the desert. Tragically, the miner died before the journey could happen, leaving Dr. DeCourcy to conduct his own unsuccessful search for the 3 buttes. The legend is also added by Native American accounts of gold in the desert. According to the Apache, a sacred area existed where the ground was scattered with gold nuggets, though it was forbidden to share the location with outsiders. In another tale, an Indian woman stumbled upon a butte covered in black-coated gold nuggets while lost and dehydrated. When she spotted a nearby railroad construction camp, she left a nugget as a token of gratitude before continuing her own journey. And a last point, a Yaqui Indian from near Warner's Ranch would occasionally make mysterious trips into the desert, returning with black gold nuggets. Though his secret remained hidden, $4,000 worth in gold was found after his death, suggesting that he had a reliable source. One theory suggests that Pegleg's gold might not have been a natural find at all, but rather the scattered remnants of a lost treasure. In an article by Robert Buck published in Desert Magazine in 1966, Buck speculated that the black-coated gold Pegleg stumbled upon may have come from another source entirely, one with maybe its own dark history. Riverside Bridge Monster. The Riverside Monster, which is often called the Riverside Bridge Monster or the Brain Tickler of Riverside, is a strange cryptid linked to one of the more unusual sightings recorded in California. It all happened on November 8, 1958, when a man named Charles Wetzel was driving down North Main Street near where it crosses the Santa Ana River, when he had an encounter he wouldn't soon forget. The river was swollen that night and the road was partially flooded. Wetzel slowed down as he approached, noticing that his radio was crackling with static. Then, just as he scanned the area, an odd figure leapt from the shadows and landed directly in front of his car. The creature was unlike anything Wetzel had ever seen before, described as tall and thin, with a round, almost scarecrow-like head that seemed right out of a Halloween nightmare. Its glowing green eyes shone with an unnatural light, and its face was devoid of any ears, dominated by a protruding mouth. Wetzel also recalled that its arms were unusually long, longer than any humans, extending almost spider-like across the windshield as it clawed at the glass. Its skin appeared rough and textured, something like scales or dried leaves, and its legs jutted out to the sides, giving it a strange, almost broken appearance. As the creature clawed and screeched at the windshield, Wetzel's instinct was to grab the caliber pistol he kept under the seat. But realizing he'd have to open the window or shoot through the glass, he decided against it. Instead, he slammed his foot on the accelerator, sending the car forward with the creature still clinging to the hood. It tumbled to the ground, where he heard it thrash and let out a horrible mix of screams and gurgles as his car scraped over it. Without looking back, Wetzel drove straight to the Riverside police station, desperate to explain what had just happened. When police inspected his car, they found scratches on the hood and windshield, as well as strange smears along the underside, which was already covered in oil. But when they returned to the scene later with bloodhounds, they found nothing to confirm his encounter. Despite the lack of evidence, another driver also reported a similar experience the very next night, although they didn't stay to investigate. After these incidents, sightings in the Santa Ana River area quieted down, except for reports of Bigfoot-like tracks found in the 1970s. The Riverside Monster then remains a unique case in cryptid lore. Lauren Coleman, a well-known researcher in cryptozoology, noted the unusual association between strange sightings and specific names, mentioning Wetzel as one linked with other oddities, alongside names like Fayette, Hobbs, and anything connected with the devil. Coleman also discovered that another man named Charles Wetzel, living in Nebraska, reported seeing something strange hopping around his farm that same year in July. The Dark Watchers of the Santa Lucias. In the mountains of California's central coast, hikers sometimes encounter strange, dark figures known as the Dark Watchers. Reports of these watchers come from people trekking along the mist-covered ridges of the Santa Lucia Mountains, especially near Big Sur. Witnesses describe these figures as standing tall, often around 7 to 10 feet, with the outline of a hat and a walking stick, quietly watching from afar. As hikers approach or even just acknowledge the figure, it often vanishes into the fog. And I'd like to mention one sighting reported in 2018 by a hiker in Ojai, California, which kind of pictures the whole narrative. The hiker was on a remote trail up Route 33 about an hour into the mountains. With no people or cars around, he suddenly felt a strange sensation, as though someone was watching him. When he looked up, he saw a black figure at the top of the mountain. Thinking it might just be an oddly shaped tree, he gave it a quick wave. To his surprise, the figure waved back. Skeptical, he brushed it off, figuring it was just some illusion. But when he took a puff of his cigarette, he watched as the figure also blew out a plume of smoke. The figure then seemed to move, almost floating upwards. The hiker, pretty freaked out by now, ran down the trail toward his car, injuring his knee in his rush to escape. So yeah, these watchers have a long history in the region, with early reports dating back to the Spanish settlers in the 1700s. The settlers called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros, which translates to the Dark Watchers. Local indigenous legends may also reference these figures, as the Chumash people have inhabited California's central coast for thousands of years and shared stories of shadowy figures and spirits within the mountains. The Watchers were later referenced by well-known writers. In the 1930s, poet Robinson Jeffers mentioned them in his work, describing figures that seemed human yet somehow different, while John Steinbeck wrote of them in his short story Flight. Steinbeck's mother was known to leave small offerings of fruit or nuts for the Watchers along her walks, which was a gesture of respect, and she claimed to sometimes find flowers left in return. Some scientists, like meteorologist Jan Null, suggest that the Watchers might be explained by a phenomenon called the Brockent specter. This effect happens when a person's shadow is cast onto mist, making it appear large and ghostly, especially under the right lighting at dawn or dusk. However, those who experience these sightings often insist that there's more to it than just an illusion or shadow, describing the Watchers as solid, silent figures that evoke a feeling of being observed. For locals and hikers who have witnessed the Dark Watchers themselves, they remain an unexplained presence in California's mountains, quietly watching those who venture through. The Lost Ship in the Desert. Stories of a mysterious ship buried in California's Salton Sea desert have circulated for generations. Described as a large ocean-going vessel stranded far inland, this ship is rumored to be loaded with treasures lost in the sands toward the northern end of the Sonoran Desert. While it may sound improbable for a ship to end up so far from the ocean, accounts of this lost vessel have been told by Native Americans, Spanish explorers, and even 19th century treasure hunters. One explanation is that an extraordinary tidal surge from the Gulf of California could have collided with the massive flood from the Colorado River, creating a temporary waterway that swept the ship inland. Once the water receded, the ship might have been left stranded in the basin. While this would require a rare set of conditions, the area's unique geography does make it kind of possible. The thing is, the Salton Sea sits at over 270 feet below sea level, forming a natural basin that could trap such floodwaters. Historical records indicate that Spanish ships did indeed navigate the Gulf of California and Colorado River Delta in the 16th century, searching for treasure and trade routes. It's important to note that the stories of a stranded vessel in the desert began around this time. One account of the lost ship appears in the writings of Antonio de Fierro Blanco. He describes a Spanish coastal pilot named Iterb who supposedly entered the Salton Sea in 1615, seeking a passage to the Atlantic. Iterb's ship, according to the story, was heavy with pearls and other goods. After months of searching, he attempted to return to the Pacific but found his route blocked. Some versions say a storm caused a mudslide, trapping the vessel, while others suggest that water levels dropped, leaving the ship stuck on a sandbar. But in both versions, Iterb had no choice but to abandon the vessel, which remained in the basin, its hull partially buried, as though still ready to set sail. Years later, a mule driver named Tuporcio Manquerna, traveling with the explorer Juan Baptista de Anza, claimed to have stumbled upon a ship filled with pearls while scouting the desert. He reportedly gathered what he could carry and made a difficult trek across the mountains to San Luis Rey Mission. He later dedicated much of his life trying to find the ship again, though without success. Manquerna only revealed his secret to a fellow traveler who shared the story as an old man. In another report from 1870, a man named Charlie Klusker set out to find the ship after hearing tales from local Native Americans. Klusker attempted to journey multiple times, once getting stranded himself in the desert sands. When he finally returned, he claimed to have seen a Spanish galleon with crosses and broken masts buried deep in the desert. Klusker planned to return with better supplies, but no one ever heard from him again. The question then remains as to whether a lost ship truly lies buried in the sands near the Salton Sea. While some view it as little more than a legend, the consistency of the stories over time keeps the interest alive. Perhaps one day, with the right conditions of wind and shifting sands, a carved hull or mast will emerge from the desert, revealing the fate of the lost ship. Vikings in California. There's a long-standing question about whether Vikings might have reached California centuries before modern explorers set foot on the west coast. In recent years, a few discoveries have hinted at the presence of early seafaring cultures along California's shores. Although there's not direct evidence of a Viking presence, artifacts found on islands off the coast reveal traces of early communities who thrived on the ocean's resources, possibly paving the way for travel long before European contact. One California visitor wandering near the historic Ventura Pier noticed a sign bearing the name Erik Erikson. He immediately connected it to Viking history, recalling names like Erik the Red and Leif Erikson, who are famous for exploring distant shores. Erik the Red was a notable Norse figure from the early 980s, exiled from Iceland because of violent conflicts, which drove him to settle in Greenland. His son, Leif Erikson, later became the first European to reach North America, traveling to a place he named Vinland, now believed to be part of Newfoundland. These early journeys hint at the Vikings' capabilities to explore far-reaching coasts, leading to the notion that perhaps they, or others with similar skills, might have ventured as far as California's shores. Although the Erik Erikson sign turned out to be for a local restaurant rather than an archaeological marker, the visitors' curiosity led to discoveries about early seafaring cultures that predate European arrivals in North America. Just off California's coast on islands like Santa Rosa and San Miguel, archaeologists have uncovered sophisticated tools dating back around 12,000 years. Among these are crescent-shaped points and other stone tools that point to a skilled hunting and fishing community. And archaeologist John Erlandson, who led excavation on these islands, found evidence that these early communities likely followed kelp forests, a major marine ecosystem rich in fish, shellfish, and sea mammals. Kelp forests lined the coast from North to South America, creating a sort of kelp highway that would have supported marine travelers and allowed for easier coastal migration. These ancient tools and settlements suggest a culture with a deep understanding of the ocean and its resources, but it still doesn't confirm any Viking presence. Yet the idea of early Norse explorers reaching California isn't too far-fetched. It's said that the Norse dreamed of finding a fabled shortcut from the Atlantic to the Pacific, sometimes called the Straits of Anian, that would link these distant shores. While the straits remain mystical, the idea encouraged further exploration, and it's possible that accounts of early visits to North America were misinterpreted or embellished over time. So yeah, while no Viking artifacts have been found, it still remains not fully unproven. For now, the possibility of a Viking presence in California remains more of a mystery. Yerba Buena Island. Yerba Buena Island, set in the middle of San Francisco Bay, carries a history filled with unusual tales and ghost stories that have been around for generations. Named Yerba Buena, or Good Herb, because of the wild mint that grew there, the island has been called different names over time. Between 1895 and 1931, it was even renamed Goat Island because of the goats that roamed its hills. Later, the island became more commonly known for connecting the eastern and western spans of the Bay Bridge and as the site of a military base alongside its man-made neighbor, Treasure Island. But despite all these changes, it's the older tales and ghostly legends that make it so interesting to anyone crossing over or visiting. One of the strangest stories from the island's past is the legend of a phantom cow. Before California was even a state, settlers reported seeing and hearing a cow wandering around the island. According to legend, pirates landed on the island and killed the cow's calf for food. Ever since, the mother cow has supposedly roamed the island, mourning the loss of her calf. Some say you might hear the faint sound of her, almost as if she's still searching for her calf. Though it might sound far-fetched, tales of the phantom cow remain one of the island's oldest mysteries and make this small island seem a little less ordinary. As for the Bay Bridge itself, it's also got some creepy stories, especially around the section that passes through Yerba, Buena Island. There's a story from 1948 about a man who ran out of gas on the bridge. While walking to find a phone, he was hit and killed by a passing car. Drivers now claim they sometimes catch a glimpse of a man in a vintage raincoat and hat standing near the bridge railing as they pass through the Yerba Buena tunnel. Usually, he appears only briefly and disappears before anyone can get a good look. He's said to be seen most often in the fog, standing as if he's kind of waiting for help that never arrived. And there's also the ghost connected to the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. During the earthquake, a section of the bridge's upper deck collapsed onto the lower deck, which ended up killing one person. Some believe this victim still haunts the eastern section of the bridge to this day. People report strange occurrences like hearing unexpected knocks on their car windows when driving on the lower deck toward Oakland, or seeing a mysterious figure in the rearview mirror, only for it to vanish. Others have even claimed to see a headless figure running alongside their car. Whether these tales are based on actual sightings or just rumors, they continue to add to the bridge's whole mystery. Proctor Valley Road. Proctor Valley Road, which is a mostly gravel stretch running between Chula Vista and Jamul, California, has been the center of numerous ghost stories and legends for decades. While development has crept closer over the years, transforming the area from isolated rural land to neighborhoods and small businesses, this road has retained its haunted reputation. Anyone who's brave enough to drive the gravel portion of Proctor Valley Road is said to face everything from ghostly apparitions and strange headlights to urban legends and encounters with monsters. One of the most infamous stories associated with the road is a legend of the teenage couple who encountered the Proctor Valley monster. According to the tale, a young couple drives down the road one evening looking for a quiet spot to park. Eventually, their car breaks down, either from a flat tire or mysterious engine trouble. The boyfriend gets out to investigate or look for help, leaving the girl in the car. As she waits, she begins to hear strange scratching noises. In the morning, police find her hiding inside the car, too terrified to move, while her boyfriend is found hanging from a nearby tree, bloodied and lifeless, with his hand or foot responsible for the scratching sound she heard. The creature said to have caused his death is known as the Proctor Valley Monster, often described as a 7-foot-tall, cow-headed beast covered in fur, like a terrifying hybrid of a Minotaur and Bigfoot. Some even attribute livestock mutilations in the area to this creature. Local enthusiasts claim that a cast of the monster's footprint, measuring 18 inches, is kept at the Bonita Museum in Chula Vista, though skeptics think it's just a Bigfoot cast. Another tale connected to the road is about Haven Bakery, once located in Jamul at the far end of the road. According to the legend, the bakery owner returned from a trip to find his daughter dead, supposedly hanging in the basement. In his grief and rage, he snapped, allegedly killing his employees, stacking their bodies in the bathroom, and eventually hanging himself. Before it was demolished in 2008, local high schoolers often visited the abandoned bakery to leave graffiti and see if they could catch a glimpse of the spirits rumored to haunt the place, particularly the spirit of the young girl in the basement. In reality though, it's said that the girl fell down the stairs and died later in the hospital, but the legend of the bloody massacre still persists. If monsters and haunted bakeries weren't enough, Proctor Valley Road also comes with the story of a demon car. Drivers on the gravel stretch have reported seeing headlights behind them, growing closer no matter how fast they go. When they look in the rearview mirror, they can only see two lights without any shape or outline of a car. It's just two bright lights gaining on them, closing in with a sense of great speed. As the road shifts back to pavement, the lights suddenly vanish, retreating back into the dirt road. Some have reported that if they stick around to watch, the lights move backward, slowly disappearing into the distance. Mugu Rock. Mugu Rock along the Pacific Coast Highway near the Point Mugu Naval Base has a reputation for its tragic legends, blending Chumash lore with more recent tales of ghostly sightings. One of the oldest stories is that of Princess Huname, a Chumash woman whose life and death are tied to the rock. According to the legend, Princess Huname was deeply loved by many because of her beauty. She eventually chose a young man who was already wanted by another woman. This scorned woman, bent on revenge, turned to a sorcerer to cast a spell. Through her magic, she was able to enchant the man, leading him to leave Huname and run off with her. Though the princess eventually found and brought him back, the curse had broken their connection. The loss devastated her, who went to the cliffs and threw herself into the ocean, turning to stone and becoming Mugu Rock. Her husband, freed from the enchantment to lay, followed her into the sea, where his hair transformed into the kelp surrounding the rock. Other stories tell of another spirit, the Lady of Mugu Rock, which was a young native woman believed to have been killed by a wealthy landowner. This figure, seen by some visitors, is described as a sorrowful apparition near the rock. Witnesses often claim she appears near the cliffside, gazing out to the sea as though still trapped in her final moments. Beyond those older tales, Mugu Rock has seen several tragedies. People taking their own life have been reported around the cliffs, and in one incident, a plane crash near the site took the lives of 88 people. Some visitors mention an unexplainable feeling of sorrow when visiting the rock, while others report faint sounds that resemble voices in the wind, suggesting the presence of those who died nearby. In earlier decades, Mugu Rock was part of a wider section of the Pacific Coast Highway, and it even appeared in Hollywood films such as It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, where it served as a prominent background. However, the highway near the rock has been eroded over time, leaving only a narrow section that remains fenced off for safety. Despite restrictions, people continue to visit the site, with some even ignoring the signs to get closer to the rock. San Miguel Island. San Miguel Island, one of California's Channel Islands, is mixed with some legend, history, and ghost stories. Located off the coast of Santa Barbara County, it's remote and rarely visited, drawing fewer than 200 people a year. And the island has accumulated many creepy tales over the centuries, largely because of its isolation and the stories surrounding those who dared to settle or explore it. One of the most prominent stories is linked to Juan Rodrigues Cabrillo, a Portuguese explorer who, in 1542, was among the first Europeans to set foot on the island. Leading an expedition along the west coast, Cabrillo's journey brought him to San Miguel, where he hoped to winter. However, it's said he suffered an injury, which some say from an attack by the local Tongva people, while others claim he injured himself during an exploration. The wound festered, and unable to heal, Cabrillo succumbed to infection in January 1543. Legend has it that he was buried on San Miguel in a lead-lined casket, dressed in his armor with a jeweled sword. Treasure hunters have searched the island for years, but his grave has never been found, leaving room for speculation that his burial site was somewhere else, possibly on nearby Santa Cruz Island or even the coast near Goleta. His final resting place, though, remains one of California's enduring mysteries. Locals say that Cabrillo's spirit still roams San Miguel, and his apparition, often seen in armor, is said to protect the island from intruders. According to legend, Cabrillo cursed the island upon his death, warning that anyone who attempted to live there permanently would suffer a violent end. And oddly enough, the island is uninhabited today, and the only visitors are researchers, park rangers, and the occasional traveler. The Curse of Griffith Park. Griffith Park, which is one of the largest urban parks in the US, is full of legends, strange tales, and rumors of curses dating back to the 1800s. This land, which now spans over 4,200 acres, originally belonged to the Fliles family and was called Rancho Los Fliles. At the heart of the story is Don Antonio Fliles, the last Fliles to own the land, who allegedly cursed it before he died, leaving behind a legacy of misfortune, eerie sightings, and ghostly occurrences. It all happened in 1863 when Don Antonio Files fell ill with smallpox, and on his deathbed, he supposedly signed over his entire estate to a friend, Don Antonio Colonel, instead of leaving it to his own family, including his blind niece, Donna Petronella. Some say that Colonel and his lawyer Don Innocente tricked the dying man, attaching a stake to his head so he would nod in agreement to the will they had prepared. When Felix's niece found out she was cut off, she was furious. She laid a curse on Colonel, Innocente, and even the judge who approved the will. Soon after, the curse seemed to take hold. Rumors spread that the lawyer was shot and killed, and the judge met an unfortunate fate as well. Colonel's family was plagued by sickness and died off, and after his own death, the inheritance he left to his wife was quickly lost in a bitter divorce. The land was eventually sold to various owners, each of whom seemed to suffer strange misfortunes. C.V. Howard, one of the landowners, made a profit selling water rights to the land, only to be gunned down while celebrating. Lucky Baldwin, another owner, faced terrible losses as fires, crop failures, and disease wiped out his livestock. Baldwin, too, met a violent end, allegedly killed by outlaws. The land then continued to change hands until it was finally acquired by Colonel Griffith J. Griffith in 1882, who made the property his own in a series of business ventures, one of which involved raising ostriches. But strange events followed Griffith's ownership too. According to stories, a storm rolled through the land shortly after Griffith acquired it, with lightning striking trees and the eerie sight of Don Antonio Felix's ghost riding through the rain. Griffith was spooked enough to avoid the land except during the day, and the ranch hands claimed that the ostriches stampeded at night, frightened by ghostly apparitions. Eventually, Griffith's venture failed, and his relations with others soured. Frank Burkett, a former associate, even tried to kill Griffith in 1891 outside the old Calvary Cemetery, but used birdshot rather than buckshot, allowing Griffith to escape with his life. One of the most talked about spots in Griffith Park is an alleged cursed picnic table, which is the setting of a grim story from 1976. Basically, on Halloween night, a young couple, Rand Garrett and Nancy Jensen, were crushed to death by a falling tree while sitting at the table. Their ashes were later scattered at the site. Rumor has it that their ghosts haunt the area, appearing around the picnic table each year on Halloween. Park workers who later tried to clear the tree reported hearing ghostly moans, feeling cold spots, and even seeing threatening messages written in fog on their truck windows. One worker reportedly died of a heart attack on the job, with signs indicating he had been dragged toward the picnic table by some unseen force. Then Griffith J. Griffith ultimately decided to distance himself from the cursed land by donating over 3,000 acres to the city of Los Angeles in 1896, but it's said that the curse seemed to follow him. He became consumed by paranoia, believing that his wife Christina was conspiring with the Pope to poison him and take his money. This irrational fear eventually led him to shoot his wife, though she survived the attack. Griffith then served 2 years in San Quentin for attempted murder, and his public reputation never recovered. After his death, his trust funded the construction of the Griffith Observatory and the Greek Theater, two iconic landmarks that remain in Griffith Park today. Beyond the haunted picnic table and the curses hold over Griffith's life, other strange tales have emerged from Griffith Park. The Los Angeles Zoo, abandoned in 1966, is said to be haunted by former zookeepers and animals. People report hearing animal noises echoing through the empty enclosures, and some even claim to see ghostly shapes darting through the darkened cages. And there's also the story of a ghostly woman believed to be Donna Petronella herself, who appears in a white dress at the Crystal Springs Ranger headquarters, which is an old abode structure believed to be the last surviving building from Rancho Los Feliz. Her ghost has also been seen riding a white horse, wandering the hills and open spaces of the park. Other visitors have seen a mysterious figure near the Hollywood sign believed to be actress Peg Entwistle, who took her own life there in 1932. William Waddell's arm. North of Santa Cruz, tucked along Highway 1, Waddell Creek carries a ghostly tale that has interested travelers for well over a century. William White Waddell, the man behind this haunting story, first came to California in 1851, driven by hopes of rebuilding his fortune after financial losses in Missouri. Known as a persistent businessman, Waddell established lumber mills, built a wharf, and worked tirelessly to develop the land around Waddell Creek. However, the lumber mill burned down more than once, the wharf he built was repeatedly destroyed by the Pacific waves, and Waddell faced setback after setback. Yet, none of these disasters foreshadowed the tragic end he would meet in 1875. One October day, while hunting deer, Waddell and his dog found themselves near a grizzly bear and her cub. The mother bear, sensing a threat, attacked Waddell. Though he managed to escape the bear, his injuries were so severe that the doctor who treated him was forced to amputate his arm to prevent further infection. The arm was buried in a meadow near the coast, a temporary measure as Waddell had hoped to be buried whole when the time came. However, Waddell's injuries proved too grave and he died on October 7, 1875. When efforts were made to retrieve his arm for his final burial, it was gone. Since that time, Waddell's arm has become the source of countless local legends said to reach out for items from unexpected travelers around Waddell Creek. From food to small personal belongings, people report mysterious disappearances in the area, often chalked up to the sticky fingers of William Waddell's arm. His missing arm is said to be cursed to roam Waddell Creek, taking anything it can reach. For those intrigued by Waddell's story, Big Basin Redwood State Park hosts a Halloween walk called The Missing Arm of William Waddell. The half-mile tour leads participants through some of the park's oldest redwoods, with actors reenacting Waddell's tragic tale. A popular hiking destination, the park offers views of beautiful waterfalls and towering redwoods. The well-known 29.5-mile skyline to the sea trail begins in the park, winding through impressive landscapes and offering hikers plenty of opportunities to keep an eye on their gear, just in case the phantom arm decides to reach out for a souvenir. Though Waddell's body is buried in Santa Cruz Memorial Park, his arm was still never to be found, and his gravesite has developed its own spooky reputation. Some visitors to the cemetery report eerie voices, shadowy figures, and even ghostly apparitions, such as a groundskeeper and Victorian-era figures. One ghostly woman, known as the White Lady of Santa Cruz, has reportedly been seen wandering near Waddell's grave and along Ocean Street. Borrego Sandman. The Anza Borrego Desert, stretching over a massive 5,850,000 acres, holds more than just sun-baked sands and rugged rock formations. Among its dry and dusty reaches, tales have long circulated of a creature known as the Borrego Sandman, which is a towering white-furred beast with a massive frame, often described as 8 feet tall and weighing around 400 pounds. With red eyes that seem to glow in the dark, this Sandman has been compared to a desert-dwelling Bigfoot, sort of a white-furred cousin to the more famous forest Bigfoot of Northern California. Stories of the Sandman trace back to Native American legends, where hairy devils, which were foul-smelling ape-like creatures, haunted the desert and were said to be avoided at all costs. As settlers moved into California during the 1800s, more sightings and encounters followed. One of the earliest recorded instances was a stagecoach passenger who spotted a large ape-like figure lurking in the brush. Then, in 1876, prospector Turner Helm encountered the Sandman near Dead Man's Hole. He attempted to communicate with it in multiple languages, but ultimately had to defend himself with his rifle when the creature became aggressive, frightening it away. Just over a decade later, in 1888, two men, Charles Cox and Edward Dean, hunted down what they believed was a Sandman after a string of gruesome murders had people on edge. The victims had been torn apart in ways that didn't match human violence, fueling speculation that a monstrous creature might be responsible. Cox and Dean claimed they shot and killed a Sandman, sending its body to San Diego for display. Yet, mysteriously, the corpse never arrived, vanishing along with any proof they might have had. Fast forward to 1939, when an anonymous prospector camp near the Borrego Sink was surrounded by a group of upright ape-like creatures. Although they didn't approach his campfire, their presence and red eyes haunted him through the night. The encounters didn't stop there. In 1964, a father and son stumbled across one of these beings, which hurled rocks at them from a distance. Later that same year, Major Viktor Stoyanov reportedly found tracks in the desert, which were massive prints measuring 14 inches long and 9 inches wide. Although he took plaster casts and photos of these tracks, the evidence has since disappeared. Further accounts surfaced as more people encountered the Sandman or his tracks. In July 1968, prospector Harold Lancaster fired his gun into the air to scare off a Sandman he encountered while prospecting east of Borrego Springs. Stories of encounters in Southern California even describe a Yucca man, which is a dark-haired version of the desert Bigfoot reported in towns like Lancaster and Palmdale, with rumors that these creatures ventured into the tunnels of Edwards Air Force Base. But yeah, despite the eerie stories and occasional sightings, very little hard evidence has been recovered. The International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine houses a plaster cast reportedly made by a retired police officer in 1962. The cast shows a 14-inch long, four-toed print without claws, suggesting a creature that walks upright much like a human. Still, some locals have embraced the Sandman legend, with nearby Ranchita even erecting a statue called the Ranchita Yeti, inspired by the Borrego Sandman. While sightings of the Sandman have dwindled since the 1970s, some speculate that it might just have migrated further north, retreating to the mountains where the cooler temperatures are more bearable. Others suggest that it might be the same creature as the one rumored to haunt Proctor Valley Road, another notorious spot for supernatural tales in Southern California. Tick Canyon Giant Rabbit. In the quiet hills of Tick Canyon, just outside Los Angeles, an unusual creature has been reported, which is the Tick Canyon Giant Rabbit. Back in March of 1969, geologist Stephen P. Albert, then a PhD candidate at UCLA, was on a routine mapping expedition when he stumbled upon something he would never forget. His mission that day was simple: map the rock formations in the area. But as he worked, something odd caught his eye. A large shadowy figure was huddled among the rocks, blending almost seamlessly with the canyon terrain. Alper edged closer, curious, until he was within 7 feet of the figure. To his surprise, the shape before him stood up, which was a massive rabbit-like creature looming around 5.5 feet tall, weighing an estimated 150 to 175 pounds. Alper, startled and unsure of what he was seeing, found himself staring at a creature that looked oddly like a kangaroo, but with noticeable rabbit features, including a cotton ball tail and long upright ears. Alpert's instincts told him it was unlike anything he'd seen, not a kangaroo, not any creature he studied before. As he studied it, the animal seemed to study him back. He noted the dark brown body, muscular forepaws, and long ears that resembled those of a rabbit, yet larger and more powerful. Without a second thought, the creature bounded away in a series of agile leaps, quickly disappearing out of sight. Alper was left in disbelief, questioning whether his eyes had truly seen what they thought. The sighting stayed with Alper, and though he was focused on finishing his work, he couldn't shake the memory. The following day, he shared the strange encounter with his colleagues at UCLA. His story circulated among faculty and students, becoming a quiet legend within the geology department. Alpert's account was hard to dismiss, especially as other witnesses, which were students and professors who had spent time in the Tick Canyon area, began reporting encounters with a similar creature. The descriptions were often vague but aligned with Alpert's sighting, which was a large muscular animal with rabbit-like ears and a short fluffy tail. Years later, in 1991, an article titled "The Tick Canyon Rabbit" appeared in the UCLA Geology Department Alumni Magazine, written by Dean Hall. In the article, Hall shared his own experience while in the Tick Canyon region. He recounted seeing a woman riding an elephant, an encounter that seemed surreal in the dry California landscape. However, the story took an even stranger turn when Hall happened upon a private property filled with animals in cages maintained by a man named Brian. The owner listened to Hall's stories, including his curiosity about the Tick Canyon Giant Rabbit. With an unusual candor, Brian confirmed that some of his animals, including 2 wallaroos, had escaped years prior, possibly leading to the reports of a giant rabbit roaming Tick Canyon. This theory seemed to answer some questions, but left others hanging. Alper, who by then had heard Hall's hypothesis, wasn't entirely convinced. In a letter to the authors of the book Weird California, Alper explained that the timing didn't match up. The walrus supposedly escaped years after his initial sighting. Plus, the animal he saw had significant differences from a walrus, including its distinctive cotton tail, much larger haunches, and oversized ears that would have looked more at home on a creature from a cartoon. But yeah, Alpert was certain that the creature he saw wasn't any escaped walrus or marsupial, but something far stranger. Presidio ghost deer. In San Diego's Presidio Park, tucked away in a quiet area called Inspiration Point, there stands a simple yet interesting monument that resembles a beloved local legend, which is a white deer known as Lucy. This odd sight is easy to overlook, marked by a circular concrete slab with deer tracks embedded into its surface, a small dry watering hole, and 3 stones carved by artist Charles Faust. The monument, embraced by trees and a sloping lawn, doesn't immediately reveal the unusual story behind it, but for those familiar with the tale, it's a fitting tribute to a deer whose presence has left a lasting mark on the community. Lucy's story begins in the mid-1960s when residents of Mission Hills started spotting a mysterious white deer wandering the area. One story suggests she escaped from the San Diego Zoo, though the zoo claimed they weren't missing any deer at the time. Another version has her as a pet of a wealthy, eccentric woman whose death left the deer to wander free. Yet another rumor combines both tales, claiming the zoo sold her to a wealthy family who then lost track of her. No matter the source, from 1965 to 1975, Lucy roamed the hills, and her striking white coat became a regular, enchanting sight for those who visited the park. Locals quickly became attached to the creature, leaving out food for her and feeling a sense of awe whenever they caught a glimpse of her among the trees. For a decade, Lucy evaded capture, moving through the neighborhoods and hills like a living ghost. People claimed she was almost magical, a spirit of the park in animal form. Her pure white fur and gentle presence made her a beloved figure, almost like a mascot, and locals began referring to her fondly by the name Lucy. Then, in December of 1975, after reports that she had been attempting to cross a highway and may have been injured, park officials decided to step in. They aimed to relocate her to a safer location, but when they tranquilized her to make the capture, the effects tragically took her life instead. Her death was deeply felt by the community, who had grown to see her as a symbol of the area. But the following year, the community established a monument in her memory, a place where her gentle spirit could be remembered. After her death, however, the legend of Lucy didn't end. Numerous reports claim she still haunts the park, often seen in the early morning or dusk, the times when the air is still and the park is quiet. Witnesses describe seeing a white deer, sometimes solid and real looking, other times appearing as a misty figure moving through the trees. Some say they've heard the sounds of rustling bushes or seen plants move as if a creature were passing through, even on still days. And beside her primary monument stands a bench also dedicated to Lucy. The plaque reads, "Join the white deer's everlasting spiritual journey," a tribute from 3 locals who wanted to honor her spirit in their own way. Both the monument and the bench now serve as reminders of the white deer who enchanted an entire community. Ghosts of Lake Elsinore. Lake Elsinore has long been a place where strange tales and ghost stories seem as abundant as the waters that lap its shores. Known for more than just the legend of its lake monster Elsie, residents speak of eerie happenings all over town. From private homes to old buildings and even deserted roads, locals and visitors alike have experienced odd encounters that suggest that town is haunted from one end to the other. Ortega Highway, a winding road that cuts through the hills near the lake, carries its own dark past. Known as Highway 74, this route has been the scene of numerous dark events. Several infamous serial killers use the road as a place to abandon victims. Some travelers even report seeing a ghostly woman near milepost 14, said to be a headless, handless figure left there by her killers, while others claim to have seen even stranger things, like a ghostly clown appearing by the roadside only to vanish, or even skeletal figures perched on poles, watching passing cars. The Old Chimes building, once a bathhouse from 1887, also holds a similar history of hauntings. Now an antique store, the building is known for its strange noises, unexpected cold drafts, and ghostly footsteps. A tragic drowning there has left behind the restless spirit of a young boy who reportedly roams its rooms. People have also reported the ghost of a young girl who died after being hit by a horse-drawn carriage and is known to move porcelain dolls around the store. Even the sound of a train has become a ghostly experience in the town. Though no trains run through Lake Elsinore anymore and the tracks have long been removed, residents swear they hear the faint whistle of a train between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. as if an old ghost train still travels its former route. Witnesses have even seen a light in the distance, like the headlight of a train coming through the night. Along Main Street, the Ambassador Hotel, a 130-year-old building, looms over the street with its own story. Residents say that every night around 1 a.m., a ghostly janitor can be seen on the roof, gazing down at the street below as if forever tending to his post. And Amy's Castle, built by the famous radio preacher Amy Semple McPherson in 1929, only adds to the town's haunted feel. This castle-like mansion, with its many rooms and hidden passageways, is said to be haunted as well. Other buildings like the abandoned Naval Academy also add to Lake Elsinore's haunted reputation. Built in the 1920s, this school closed down in 1977, but people insist it's anything but empty. Some claim to see shadows move through the halls or hear voices when no one is around. Others believe that nearby Machado House and Lakeside Hotel are haunted too, though it's unclear if these stories are rooted in real experiences or simply the creepy atmosphere that clings to every corner of Lake Elsinore. With so many tales of ghostly figures, unexplained noises, and restless spirits, it's no surprise that Lake Elsinore has become a haven for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts. Locals swear by these stories, and visitors who come in search of the supernatural often leave with tales of their own. The Black Demon. In the waters of the Gulf of California, south of San Diego, there are accounts of a massive dark-colored shark unlike any other. Locals and fishermen know it as the Black Demon. Descriptions of the shark put it at a length of 20 to 60 feet, far larger than typical sharks in the region. Its silhouette resembles a great white shark, yet it's marked by dark black hue and a massive distinctive tail, making it even more formidable in appearance. In 2008, fisherman Eric Mack reported a close encounter with this creature, claiming that it rocked his boat as he watched its tail fin rise 5 feet out of the water. The intensity of the experience left him convinced that this wasn't just an oversized great white. Other reports too followed, with one from April 2012 noting the discovery of an almost 20-foot great white nearby, weighing around 2,000 pounds, yet even this creature paled in comparison to the Black Demon's rumored size. Speculation about the creature's identity ranges from a melanistic great white to a previously unknown species or even a surviving megalodon. Megalodon teeth have been uncovered in places like California's Sharktooth Hill bone bed, fueling the idea that this ancient predator might still lurk in the depths. Steve Alten's 1997 novel Meg captured this mystery, telling a fictionalized story of a megalodon still terrorizing California's coastline. Skeptics, however, propose a more straightforward explanation. They suggest that these sightings are merely of whale sharks, which are significantly larger than great whites and dark in color. But unlike the tales of aggression associated with the Black Demon, whale sharks are more gentle giants, slow-moving filter feeders that pose no threat to humans. Still, for those who see a large dark fin cutting through the water, the mystery still lingers. Lone Pine Mound Devil. The Lone Pine Mound Devil is a fearsome creature rooted in the folklore of North America's west coast. Known by some as a distant relative to the infamous Jersey Devil, this creature has inspired tales and warnings throughout history. Often described as a large, furry, multi-winged predator with sharp talons and venomous fangs, the Lone Pine Mound Devil is thought to dwell in the remote forests and mountains of the American Southwest and parts of northern Mexico. Eyewitnesses and storytellers depict it as a bat-like figure with a powerful, vicious nature, allegedly preying on animals like coyotes and bobcats, and at times humans. But unlike most predators that consume their prey for nourishment, the mound devil is said to devour only the cartilage and soft tissue, leaving the rest of the carcass to rot, perhaps as a warning or to satisfy some twisted instinct. The origins of its name are unclear, but it likely derives from its supposed habitat near Lone Pine, California, and the brutal nature of its attacks. Its lore ended up growing as settlers began to populate the Western territories during the mid-19th century. Prospectors, adventurers, and families who ventured into the mounds would sometimes encounter strange scenes, being convoys with passengers unrecognizably mauled, with their faces disfigured and torsos stripped to the bone. These grisly sights fueled the tale of the Mound Devil, especially among the 49ers who spread word of the creature's ferocity throughout the region. The creature has not only been a terror in local lore, but also a figure of vengeance in some beliefs. Some folklore claims that the Mound Devil only targets those who disrespect the wilderness. This idea is central to the belief of those who see the devil as a guardian of the natural order, attacking only those who disrupt or exploit its habitat. According to a rumor often shared among believers, individuals who desecrate the land, disturb its balance, or disrespect the mound devil's existence are the most likely to become his victims. And the most widely recounted human encounter with the Lone Pine Mound Devil took place in 1878 when a stagecoach of Spanish settlers went missing in the Sierra Nevada mountains. 37 men, women, and children had vanished on their way to a mission near San Diego. Weeks later, a priest named Father Justus Martinez arrived at the mission alone, starving and exhausted, with only his clothes and a journal. He described in his journal a disturbing sequence of events. The settlers who were worn out from the travel had thrown a celebration for St. Roderick, with fires burning late into the night. But the priest took refuge outside the camp, watching as the settlers unwillingly drew winged creatures out from the surrounding trees. He called them demons and wrote of how they swarmed the encampment, describing a horrific scene of attack. His final entry reveals his despair as he noted, "They are all gone. The winged demons have risen." He added a haunting description of how only one tree, the lone pine, remained on the mountain after the demons retreated, as if marking their territory. After the turn of the 20th century though, reported sightings of the Mound Devil declined, likely because of the influx of settlers in Southern California, which might have driven the creature deeper into hiding. However, the early 2000s also saw a surprising resurgence in accounts of sightings and strange occurrences attributed to the Mound Devil, primarily between 2003 and 2010. For example, in 2010, a group of high school students disappeared in Death Valley. And more recently, in 2021, the legend of the Lone Pine Mound Devil attracted broader attention when the Crash Course Cryptozoology YouTube channel released a short documentary exposing much of the legend as an internet hoax. According to the documentary, much of the recent lore about the creature traces back to a 2010 prank video by the comedy group Chad, Matt, and Rob, who crafted a horror comedy short featuring a Mound Devil encounter. While the original video was removed, copies of it still circulate, and elements of the Mound Devil's supposed appearance, like an eyewitness sketch of a multi-winged demon, have persisted in popular imagination. Despite this debunking though, belief in the Lone Pine Mound Devil still endures in certain circles. For some, the creature remains a powerful symbol of nature's wrath against those who disrespect it. As with other creatures, it exists on the fringes of folklore, where stories of strange creatures blend with cautionary tales about the wilderness. The Hemet Maze Stone. The Hemet Maze Stone, found in Reinhardt Canyon near Hemet, Southern California, is a unique example of ancient rock art. The design on the stone features a maze-like pattern carved into a large flat boulder, forming a square filled with interconnected lines and shapes. The maze itself resembles a swastika, which is a symbol that appears across various cultures, often representing ideas like eternity and good fortune in Native American and Asian art. The origin of this design though still remains unknown, with some theories suggesting it was created by indigenous Californian groups, while others speculate that it may have been carved by early Asian visitors. One theory is that Chinese Buddhist monks or possibly shipwrecked sailors created the Hemet Maze Stone. The design's resemblance to the Buddhist swastika, which symbolizes eternity and balance in Chinese art, has led some to propose that it was carved by Buddhist travelers who arrived in North America before Columbus. In the early 1400s, Chinese explorers led by Admiral Zhang He undertook voyages that reached distant islands, including East Africa. This theory, promoted by Gavin Menzies in his book 1421, The Year China Discovered America, suggests that Zhang He's fleet might have reached the Americas before European explorers. Proponents imagine that Chinese sailors or monks who may have been stranded could have left traces like the Hemet Maystone. However, most historians remain skeptical as there is no solid evidence supporting this theory. No artifacts, settlements, or monasteries linked to the Chinese have been found in California, and the design of the Buddhist swastika doesn't closely match the one seen on the stone. Another theory, which is more widely accepted, is that the Hemet Maystone was created by indigenous Californians. The design closely resembles the Rancho Bernardo style of rock art found throughout Southern California, especially in Riverside and San Diego counties. This style of rock art typically features straight-edged geometric shapes and maze-like patterns, without any images of animals, plants, or people, focusing more on complex designs made up of lines and squares. Similar designs have even been found in areas like Palm Canyon, Salton Sea, and Rancho Bernardo, which suggests that the Hemet Maystone was part of a larger tradition of rock art in the region. The exact group responsible for creating the Hemet Maystone, though, is still debated. The Kumeyaay people who lived in Southern California are often considered likely creators, as many examples of similar rock art are found in their traditional territory. However, the style is also present in other areas associated with other groups like the Luiseno, Juaneno, Cupeno, and the Cahuilla, suggesting that this style may have spread among several cultures.